Sun Tae-hwan is an engineer at the Sejong base in Korea. The company was getting bigger and bigger, and he was sent along with his comrades to Antarctica. Tae-hwan did his job as usual, and at the end of the day returned to the base. But when he got there, he didn't find any of his comrades. At first he thought it was just a prank, but he soon realized he was the only one left alone in a base surrounded by unknown zombies. The story begins in Antarctica, in an area with bases in several countries, including China and South Korea. Soon we see the protagonist Sun Tae-hwan doing his job as usual. He realizes that the blizzard is increasing in that place and is getting more and more difficult. The guy was even chased by a penguin. He scolded the animal and said that here it was very dangerous, then accelerated towards the Korean base Sejong. While driving, Tae-hwan continued to complain about the frequent appearance of penguins that come to steal his fish. On the other hand, the animal stared blankly until the protagonist disappeared from his field of vision. Tae-hwan finally arrived at the base and opened the door. He barely arrived and already began to justify his delay by saying that it was because of the blizzard. But as soon as he looked ahead, he saw that there was no one. A silence hovered in the empty room. He thought it was all just a joke by his friends because he was late. So he says he will hunt one by one and starts to take off his cold clothes to be more agile. Tae-hwan opens room by room and screams for his friends. The boy even thinks that this is nothing more than a surprise party. But all the rooms are empty. One of them looks much colder than usual, and the protagonist screams, asking if his friends want to let an engineer really be frozen. He asks where the generator is and assumes that the heating system has also broken. The protagonist takes a flashlight out of his pocket and decides to investigate the place. He realizes that the weather is a little strange and tells the crowd that this is not funny anymore. So he screams for the captain and his friend Hyung, but hears no answer. Suddenly a noise is heard inside a closed room. Tae-hwan feels a shiver down his spine and still goes to check what is happening. He opens the door and is faced with a terrifying scene. A human head. The protagonist takes a quick looking for the killer in the room, but all he sees are food and objects thrown everywhere. The guy begins to realize that something may be wrong, and his first thought is to turn on the lights because he is very afraid. While passing through the corridor, the protagonist wonders what happened. He assumes that his entire team was evacuated from this base to another because of the blizzard, but he does not understand why he was not warned and believes that no other base would hold his entire team. At that moment, a noise is heard in the control room. A smile opens on the protagonist's face, and he thinks he has finally found his companions who were hiding. But as soon as he opened the door, what he found was not a good thing. The smile quickly disappeared from Tae-hwan's face. He ended up finding a woman attacking a man. She turns to him when she notices his presence and runs towards him. The protagonist starts to ask if this prank isn't too heavy. The woman manages to knock him to the ground and tries to bite his arm. Tae-hwan asks what she's doing and says that the costume is very realistic. This guy ignored all the red flags, but when his arm starts to hurt, he kicks it, throwing the woman back. At that moment, Tae-hwan looks towards the victim's body in the room and realizes that it is the captain. He doesn't have much time to think because the woman appears again. Tae-hwan kicks her once again and suddenly realizes who that woman is. Recently, he went out with his comrades to a bar after a day of work. The protagonist dated a girl named Minseo when he was in Korea, but she broke up with him, and so the boy decided to come to Antarctica. The friends, knowing this, did everything to leave the happy protagonist. It was in that bar that he met a girl who was also from Sejong base. Her name was Lee Hen-young, the loveliest girl he met, but who has now turned into a terrible monster. Tae-hwan couldn't believe that Lee turned into a zombie. It was unbelievable that the sweet girl could have such a scary expression. He tries to tell himself that this is crazy and approaches her, but Lee grits his teeth preparing to attack. Tae-hwan takes a few steps back and ends up bumping into a spear. He sees no other option but to use this to defend himself. The next moment, Lee attacks and he manages to dodge. She runs back towards him and jumps into his arms. The protagonist ends up using the tip of the spear on his heart. The girl keeps moving forward as he begs her to stop. The spear slowly pierced Lee's body, and she didn't back down at any time. Tae-hwan didn't want to hurt her and apologized. He walks away and Lee keeps attacking, even injured. The protagonist doesn't know what else to do because he doesn't want to cause any fatal injury. But the next moment, Lee runs to him with his mouth open. With no other option, the protagonist ends up using the spear around his neck. He pushes until he is stopped by a wall. The zombie girl doesn't seem to have been defeated, and she tries to get out even after so many critical injuries. Suddenly his head lowers and Tae-hwan realizes that he succeeded. Suddenly the wounds begin to pour a black liquid instead of red. The protagonist watches in fright until the girl's body disappears, leaving behind only a black trail. Tae-hwan finally understands why the entire team disappeared. They probably evaporated without a trace. The protagonist approaches the goo left by Lee and wonders wonders if it was turned into a zombie because of some contamination. At that moment, a movie plays in his head and he remembers that this place was full of people. Probably by now everyone has been bitten. The boy is scared by this thought and ends up being scared by his own reflection in the mirror. He tries to convince himself that he will get out of this alive and just needs to avoid direct contact with the zombies. So his first goal was to protect himself, turn on the electricity and the heater. He stops for a moment when he realizes that he may be the only one left alive. The next day, Tae-hwan focused on saving food. He started to feel thirsty and remembered that his friend Hyung always told him to go to the emergency water supply in the fridge, and that's what he did, but unfortunately found Hyung's body there. The guy probably decided that it would be better to freeze than go through the zombies. The protagonist couldn't hold back his tears when he saw his best friend from the base in that state. After that event, the protagonist continued to fight for his survival. As an engineer, he knew where the generators of the Sejong station were, so he got up the courage and went towards the station to restore electricity and heating. Tae-hwan arrived at the place and realized that there were no zombies around. In addition, the blizzard had increased twice as much since the base settled here. At that moment, he approaches the door of the generator station and comes across a hand. In the next moment, several knocks are heard. On the door, the protagonist falls backwards in fear and realizes that the place is taken over by zombies. There is no way for him to enter. Tae-hwan remembers all the bodies he has found so far of very important people and begins to tremble. But he soon tells himself that he can't stay here waiting for his end to come. At that moment, the boy remembers that there is an emergency generator next to the engine room and goes towards it. Suddenly, the protagonist's attention is drawn to a huge smoke coming out of Qinling Station, which is the base of China. He says that this is none of his business and now he has to focus on surviving. The protagonist finally reaches the engine room and breaks down the door. The first thing he sees his front is a strange black liquid, just like Lee's. Tae-hwan deduces what it is and keeps going ahead. He wonders why this had to happen to him. The boy could have definitely avoided all this if he had continued as a pilot within the army, but then he was left by Minseo, who completely destroyed his plans. After he was abandoned, he decided to focus on another job and became an engineer. Now the protagonist blames him for all the despair he is going through. Suddenly the boy is taken out of his thoughts by a noise that comes from the window. A mountain of snow falls on top of a body that he had not even noticed. The protagonist approaches and quickly attacks with the spear, but soon realizes that it was not a zombie. In fact, it is just the corpse of an ordinary man that was frozen. Tae-hwan realizes from the guy's face that he was Chinese, probably from the Qinling base. At that moment, another noise is heard from above and the protagonist realizes that he has a second floor. He gathers courage and goes to find out what it is. Tae-hwan climbs the stairs silently and starts walking down the hallway. Suddenly someone attacks him with a wrench. The protagonist tries to defend himself and grabs the person's hand, who starts screaming and asks him to let her go. The boy soon realizes that he is a human and not a zombie. The person tries to get rid of his arms and he quickly puts her against the wall. The protagonist sees his face and asks if it is Sujin. A glimmer of hope is seen in the girl's eye when he hears his name, and she also recognizes him. They look at each other for a few moments. A moment later, the two sit together near a fire created by the protagonist. He asks Sujin what happened, but she replies that she doesn't know and was going to ask him the same question. Tae-hwan asks if the girl stayed here the whole time. Sujin replies that before everything happened, she had made a medical visit to the Machu Picchu base. When she came back, everything was already in complete chaos. The protagonist listens and a curiosity arises in her mind. He remembers the wrench she used and also remembers some injuries that her companions had, much like injuries caused by tools. At that moment, he asks if it really took her 3 to 4 days to return from Machu Picchu, then questioned why she didn't use a snowmobile to return early. Sujin replies that her vehicle ended up breaking down at the Machu Picchu base. She notices Tae-hwan's tone of voice and asks if he is suspicious of her. The protagonist apologizes and confesses that he was suspicious because he is very confused about everything. The girl is silent, but then they talked a lot and were relieved because none of them became zombies, but they were still worried if they would survive for a long time. The protagonist analyzed the situation well and is determined to survive. He also knows that it would be very good to have a doctor as an ally. Thinking about it, the protagonist suggests to the girl that they stay together. Since they are the only survivors, he adds that he intends to turn on the electricity and believes that he cannot do it alone. The girl agrees because she is also afraid to stay in this place alone. But before going, Tae-hwan decides to change weapons. Sujin asks why. He explains that it is strategically advantageous. Being the strongest, it is better to wield the wrench, and for her it is safer to use the long spear. The protagonist adds that he wants to leave her with the most powerful weapon situation because he wants to trust her. The girl smiles when she hears this and agrees. The two hold hands to seal the beginning of a great friendship. But suddenly they are interrupted by a big noise downstairs. Without thinking twice, the two prepare to go see what is happening. The protagonist takes the lead in the situation and the girl stays behind with the spear. Sujin trembles with fear as he asks if he left the door open when he went upstairs. Taehwan replies that of course not. He clearly remembers closing the door. At that moment the two can see that the door is open and some footprints are left in the snow towards the bottom of the house. The protagonist calms down and said that he will first close the door. This will make the two of them only deal with one enemy. The boy starts to go down the stairs slowly and Sujin follows behind. Suddenly the girl takes a wrong step and ends up making a lot of noise. The zombies outside knock on the door with all their strength. Taehwan scolds her and asks her to be more careful because these things react very well to the sound. Sujin now holds his breath. They finally arrive at the door and the protagonist realizes that outside there is a snowmobile. At that moment a noise catches his attention and he sees several zombies approaching. The boy gets extremely nervous and wonders how these things appeared so fast. He then hurries up and asks Sujin to help close the door by pushing this snow back. Taehwan pushes but nothing happens because it is too frozen. The girl realizes that the zombies are getting closer. Without thinking twice she kicks with all her might in that snow. This ends up drawing the attention of all the zombies to them. But thanks to the girl's kick they manage to close the door. At that moment the two sit on the ground relieved. Taehwan takes Sujin's hand while saying that now they are safe. She quickly asks if he is hitting on her, but the protagonist asks the girl not to think such nonsense. The next moment hands over a flashlight and asks Sujin to light it while he completely closes the door with the fishing line. The boy quickly goes to the door and makes a few turns on the handle. Sujin stays behind taking care of the defense and asks if the protagonist won't say anything. Taehwan asks what she means. The girl says that she is asking about the zombies outside and the traces of black liquid that they saw here. She says that it is time to tell the truth and confesses that that black liquid that was in the wrench was when she eliminated the creature that was transforming. This happened when she went to the generator room to turn on the power. The protagonist finally understands what she is talking about and says that he will not lie there. But before asking if she needs to say anything else, Sujin stops for a moment and says that he only thought about it for now. He soon says that this is typical of her. Suddenly a noise is heard inside the house and they finally remember that someone entered. Taehwan leads the situation again and asks the girl to let her know if she sees any movement. Both follow the trail left by the creature until it ends. The protagonist suggests going to the generator because if they can turn on the electricity things will improve a little. Sujin agrees. They both manage to reach the emergency generator and the protagonist celebrates. But at that moment Sujin hears a noise and catches his attention. He looks back and sees nothing. Sujin is sure he heard something. Taehwan looks towards the second floor and wonders if zombies can even climb stairs. At that moment the protagonist was surprised with a zombie hanging from the ceiling. The creature attacks, knocking him to the ground. The girl despairs. The protagonist yells at her to use the spear on the zombie, but then changes her mind and just asks her to stand still. He decides that he has to solve this himself and throws the zombie backwards, then reaches out towards the wrench, but the tool slips when he was about to pick it up. Suddenly the zombie appears from behind. With no other option the protagonist screams for Sujin and she hits the zombie with the spear. The girl keeps the creature pressed and pushes the wrench towards the protagonist for him to attack too. Taehwan advances towards the zombie and swings the tool. The next moment that thing simply jumps up, taking with it the tip of the spear. The protagonist asks her to run away, but Sujin refuses to leave him alone. Taehwan remembers that there were no usable blunt weapons in the base and deep down he knew that knives were useless against such things. But now he wonders what he can use to destroy these zombies. In that moment the creature observes the two from above. Soon an idea arises in the protagonist's mind and he thinks it can work. So he turns to Sujin and starts running, daring the zombie to catch him. The girl screams, asking what he is doing. Taehwan just replies that she should stay there. The boy goes towards the engine room because he knows every corner as if it were his own room. In addition, his eyes have already gotten used to the darkness. Taehwan arrives in the room and realizes that the zombie did not follow him. He wonders if that thing noticed his trap, but soon thinks not because these zombies should not be so smart. At that moment he goes back to the girl, who asks if he is crazy. The protagonist replies that she should turn off the light and be silent. Sujin reluctantly agrees and turns off the flashlight, but takes a scalpel out of the bag. After all the lights are off, the protagonist starts screaming for the zombie again, asking if he is afraid and will not attack. Taehwan realizes that nothing is happening and has second idea. He cuts off his own arm and some red drops fall to the ground. At that moment the boy starts to swing the wrench, saying that he is injured and asking if the zombie will not appear. His plan works very well and a noise is heard from above. The creature runs at full speed towards the smell of the red liquid. The speed of this thing is so fast that the protagonist can barely follow it with his eyes. The next moment the zombie appears in front of him. Taehwan celebrates internally that the plan worked and starts running. He is chased by the zombie who easily gets tangled in the fishing line halfway. The trap works and the monster falls to the ground. Taehwan yells for Sujin to turn on the light and she obeys. He starts to hit the zombie with the wrench. That same black liquid appears and the zombie begins to disappear. The protagonist can finally breathe a sigh of relief. He turns to talk to the girl and when he looks he sees her running towards him with the scalpel tied to the tip of the spear. The protagonist does not believe that he will be betrayed. A quick memory takes Taehwan to the past, but precisely at the time of college. When he first talked about Sujin, his dorm mate asked if he knew her and the protagonist confirmed. The guy then says that Sujin is very intelligent and heard that she was an elite specialist. Taehwan is surprised and says that she could easily open a practice. The colleague says that before that she spent a year working with doctors in various places in the country. Taehwan asks where he heard all this. The colleague gives a passionate smile and says that it was Lee who told him. Even she doesn't have a boyfriend. At that moment the protagonist leaves his thoughts and returns to the present. The spear passes close to his head and hits the zombie that was coming after him. Taehwan had not noticed her presence and would be easily attacked if the girl was not there. At that moment Sujin falls to the ground and starts crying, saying that he should no longer try to solve things alone. Taehwan hugs her and tries to calm her down. He says that everything went well and they are safe, but the girl angrily asks what he intended to do if everything went wrong. He replies that he couldn't because she's here. Sujin soon notices a cut on his arm and asks what that was. Taehwan replies that he was the one who did it to get the zombie's attention. The girl starts to pull his arm and says she'll fix it. The protagonist asks Sujin to be more careful and asks if she got her medical license in a cereal box. The two continue arguing for a long time. After the bandage they turn to the corpses. Sujin says that humans adapt quickly. Now they look like two wretches sifting through corpses. The protagonist listens to what Sujin is saying and comes to the conclusion that she is right. He never thought he would murder someone so easily. But now she's lost count of how many corpses she's collected. Taehwan does a quick analysis of these two zombies and he realizes that they had a certain degree of intelligence. Unlike Lee, this makes him more worried and he wonders what is causing this development. Sujin realizes that Taehwan is silent and asks if everything is okay. He replies yes and adds that he is happy to have her here, or he would have already been eaten. She replies that she feels the same. After that the two go to the generator. Taehwan approaches the panel and tries to turn it on. He presses all the buttons and nothing happens. The boy then opens the door and has a surprise. Sujin asks what happened and he starts cursing, saying that those damn people took the battery. Basically the people who fled took all the food and the battery. It's very bad news for the two survivors. A little later Sujin redoes the bandage. Taehwan complains that it hurts. The girl says to hold on because it's just alcohol. He looks at his watch and realizes that it's been more than 4 hours since they went back to base. Things are getting worse. The firewood is running out and they haven't gotten electricity. Sujin lowers his head sadly. The protagonist looks at the bandage and asks if she has ever seen that black liquid that evaporates from the zombie's body. The girl replies yes, but does not know what causes it. In addition, the corpses of some zombies also melt and evaporate. There has probably never been a report of this. The protagonist agrees and faces her. Sujin keeps looking, waiting for him to say something, but they spend a few seconds just looking at each other's faces. Taehwan looks away embarrassed and changes the subject, saying that it's better to get some oil, but the girl is against it, saying that it will make a lot of smoke and they will suffocate. The protagonist says that she is right. He gets even angrier at people for running away and leaving them there with nothing to survive. Taehwan uses all the curses that come into his head. Sujin just watches in silence. Suddenly the protagonist stops talking and gives a scary laugh. The girl quickly gets up and asks if Taehwan is delirious with fever. He replies that he has a battery. Sujin doesn't understand anything and asks what he's talking about. The protagonist happily replies that he knows a way to recover the battery. At that moment, the two run to the window and see that there are still zombies outside. Taehwan tells the girl that these creatures still act like humans. They even know how to drive a snowmobile. The protagonist points to the motorcycle and says that it has a battery. Just bring it into the house and use it in the generator. The girl says that there are still many zombies down there and near the motorcycle. It will be difficult to get the battery. Taehwan smiles and says that he thinks it is better this way. A few minutes later Sujin says he prepared the bottles of alcohol. She fears that the plan will not work, but Taehwan is confident. She says she believes in him and lets the boy take the lead. The protagonist protagonist approaches the window and looks at the zombies trying to invade the house. He starts a count, and when he arrives at the last second he sets the bottle on fire, then throws it on top of the zombies. The fire quickly spreads and they start screaming. Taehwan and Sujin celebrate, but soon the boy's expression changes. He realizes he was right, and these things don't feel pain. At that moment the zombies keep knocking on the door as if nothing had happened. Sujin asks if he has a plan B. Taehwan takes a bottle with nothing and throws it next to the zombies. None of the creatures notice the bottle. The protagonist says it was as they thought. The zombies are melting and losing their hearing. At that moment he finds an opportunity to get the battery. Taehwan asks Sujin to stay inside the building, but the girl remembers that he is only alive because of her. The protagonist makes a silly face and asks how fast she can run in 100 meters. The girl is silent. Taehwan strokes her hair and says that he is only doing this because he wants her to be safe. He adds that he will come back to her, so just wait. The protagonist puts on his cold suit and prepares to leave, but first she asks Sujin if the motorcycle she came from is near the lodgings. The girl confirms. The protagonist begins to leave the building and says that she should not open the door unless he asks her to. The boy finally lands on the ground and runs towards the motorcycle. After a few minutes he finds it and sees that it is covered in snow. While this Sujin waits anxiously in the building, she looks towards the body of the Chinese geologist and remembers having already seen him. What the girl does not understand is what he came to do in Antarctica. Thinking about it seems very suspicious because many geologists and biologists from different countries were sent here. Anyway, she does not come to any conclusion and mentally asks the protagonist to hurry up because she is with fear. Suddenly she hears a noise outside and realizes that the boy has returned. Sujin soon asks what he is doing. Taehwan passes at high speed near the zombies, then uses a bat to knock them down. He seems to have lost his fear of everything. Sujin screams again for him. The protagonist says that bike is a different model. The battery is not compatible, so he will create a path for her to be able to pass safely and move the wood. At that moment Taehwan accelerates and starts hitting the zombies. He says it's getting fun and will only stop when he destroys everyone. The protagonist goes towards a zombie and at the time of attack the creature dodges. He looks back surprised and begins to be chased by another zombie that appeared out of nowhere. Suddenly this creature grabs him and the two fall to the ground. The protagonist manages to free himself and create a good distance between the two. Sujin screams worriedly. The zombie that is still on fire faces Taehwan. The protagonist realizes that the bat is left behind, but fortunately he brought the wrench with him. He smiles and moves forward to attack. The zombie seems much faster, and the protagonist wonders if he is one of those special ones. At that moment Taehwan swings the key towards the creature's head, but he dodges and ends up being hit in the arm. Another zombie appears and the two fall together. The protagonist takes advantage of this opportunity and starts hitting them with all his strength. Suddenly another zombie advances and Taehwan ends up falling to the ground after losing his balance. He also loses the wrench and the creature manages to grab his hand. The zombie throws Taehwan over his shoulder and throws him away. The boy wonders if this thing is a fighter. He then grabs the zombie by the clothes and says that he also did judo, then throws it towards the other monsters. The protagonist takes advantage of the opening to get his wrench back. He succeeds and starts hitting the zombies, but soon finds himself surrounded by those things. The boy starts cursing, saying that everything could be different if he had a proper weapon. Suddenly he hears a voice calling affectionately and realizes that it is Sujin. The protagonist believes that they will still not be able to beat these things, even if it is 2 against 3. In this blizzard it is very disadvantageous for humans against zombies. Taehwan tries to think of a plan and his eyes find a wooden shed. He then yells at Sujin not to get closer and go back to the building. Then the boy starts running and all the zombies go after him. Sujin watches the scene worried when suddenly he hears a noise coming from behind. The girl turns around and sees a zombie pulling his pants. She destroys it easily, then looks around looking for the protagonist and gets angry that he is risking his life alone. She screams his name but no one answers. Sujin then sees several zombies gathered at the door of the shed and assumes that the protagonist managed to hide there, but is still worried. Suddenly a zombie looks directly into her eyes and screams, as if telling her not to get closer. Sujin freezes in place. She gets a considerable distance and realizes that she greatly underestimated these zombies by thinking she could handle it alone. This makes her even more worried about Taehwan. Suddenly the girl hears a noise from inside the shed and gets scared. The protagonist grabs a chainsaw and starts to break down the door. Sujin is glad he's okay. The boy opens it a smile and then attacks the zombies. He destroys them one by one, but the last one seems to be different and holds the chainsaw with his head. The next moment jumps on top of Taehwan. The protagonist ends up dropping the chainsaw and wonders angrily if these garbage are evolving. The zombie begins to pour that strange black liquid. Taehwan is surprised because the creature is not trying to bite. Suddenly he realizes what the intention of that thing is. The goal is to make him consume this black liquid and infect it. As soon as he realizes this, the protagonist puts his hand in his mouth. Sujin approaches from behind and attacks the zombie with the spear, then throws him aside. The girl looks worried, asking if he is okay and if he has consumed any of that liquid. Taehwan reassures her that everything is okay and gives him a smile. Sujin helps him up and says that he will never forgive him if he hurts himself. The protagonist again thanks him for saving him once again. He says that the night will come soon and it is better to hurry to return the battery and put firewood. After that they return to the building and move the firewood to the engine room. For now they will act as needed. The protagonist recovered the electricity, but realized that the battery of the motorcycle was not enough for heating, so he took as much firewood as possible and transported it to the second floor. When the electricity came back, a device caught the attention of the protagonist. He ran towards the sound and realized that it was a radio communicator, which was working perfectly. The boy quickly grabs a walkie-talkie and communicates with the person on the other end of the line. The English voice asks where he is. Taehwan and Sujin finally find a hope. The protagonist quickly introduces himself as 01 and asks for a rescue team. He decides not to say anything about the zombies, but the voice on the other end of the line asks if he is still alive. This leaves the protagonist and the girl a little confused. The scene changes to the person on the other end of the line. The man in the cold suit tells the protagonist that he is sending a team to save them, after which he hangs up the walkie-talkie and calls the boss. But the guy looks at the corpse of an animal and aggressively replies that he managed to hear the conversation. He gets up and says it's time to hunt. Meanwhile, the protagonist wonders what the guy meant when he asked if he was still alive. Taehwan gets angry because the person on the other side did not identify himself or ask about the number of members. Sujin replies that the man asked if they were safe, but the protagonist replies that this question was just to know if they were alive. The girl asks what that means. He replies that these trash definitely know about the zombie situation. Taehwan deduces that the survivors had already used the radio to report what was happening to the International Emergency Department, but instead of waiting for rescue, they fled in boat's lifeguard. Now the protagonist is more worried about having made the transmission. Sujin changes the subject a little and says that these corpses vaporize from the organs to the bones. Taehwan asks if she saw this. She replies that she realized it after eliminating the first zombie, because she was watching to see if it would get up and move again. Usually they take about a day to disappear. The girl tells it in the most natural way while eating. The protagonist says it's strange because Lee's corpse disappeared instantly. Sujin is sad to hear her friend's name. She remembers about the last zombies and thinks that if they are eliminated suddenly, they take longer to disappear, but if they were hit gradually, it is faster to disappear. She explains that it is just a hypothesis. The protagonist no longer knows what to think and says that he cannot feel a difference in any corpse. Sujin asks if he thinks that this rescue team will really come. Taehwan replies that he does not know. One thing that doesn't leave your mind is where the survivors who requested the rescue went. Sujin thinks they are still on the mainland since they don't have a boat. The protagonist says that if they took a boat, it is easy to get to the island of Livingston. The girl says she remembers that name because it is a tourist spot. Then she asks if they can't go there too. Taehwan asks if she goes swimming. Sujin remembers that he needs a boat. The protagonist looks back and realizes that he only has food for a week, so he turns to the girl and says that they will leave if the rescue team does not come. She asks where they are going. He replies that for base Fredge. Sujin recognizes this name and asks if it is the base of Chile. Taehwan confirms and says that there is an Air Force base. There may be a small plane and he knows how to fly. Sujin smiles and says that it is worth trying. After that conversation, the two were falling asleep, but they still felt insecure, so they decided to take turns in surveillance. Sujin lay on the bed while the protagonist studied the map. He was happy to see that the girl slept. After that, Taehwan goes back to circling the places on the map, but it doesn't take long to get sleepy. He tries to resist because it is his turn to watch. Suddenly the boy ends up sleeping and a silhouette enters the door. With his eyes closed, the scene of his sister invades his mind. She scolded him for sleeping so much and asked if he intended to protect the country like that. Taehwan replied that he might not protect the country, but he was sure he was going to protect her. The girl smiles and asks if that means he would come to save her if something happened. The protagonist takes a deep breath and hits his forehead. He promises that he will come running if something happens. The girl asks if it is true and he replies yes. Taehwan has a bad feeling and looks to the side. The sister turns into a zombie and asks why he didn't keep his promise, then attacks him in the neck. Suddenly the protagonist wakes up desperate, touching his neck. Sunji approaches and asks if he is okay. She starts waving her hand and questions if it was a nightmare. Taehwan gets blurry vision and everything starts to spin. He lowers his head trying to regain consciousness and apologizes for dozing off during surveillance hours. Soonji gives a gentle smile and says that it's okay because she got enough sleep. After a while the two prepare to leave the building. Taehwan says he will take a small radio, GPS and food. The girl looks scared and asks if he will take it there. The protagonist asks if she is talking about the chainsaw and says that it was something that only he and the captain knew where it was. Sujin asks why they brought something like this to Antarctica. Taehwan replies that they plan to make an igloo. The girl questions if it is not forbidden to build snow. Suddenly a deafening noise is heard outside. They look at each other scared. The noise gets louder and louder and Taehwan realizes that it is a shot. He runs and turns off all the lights. Sujin asks if it's the rescue team and the protagonist replies that he's not sure. She says she thinks they're shooting the zombies, but the girl remembers that firearms are forbidden here. The protagonist also remembers that when he got in touch he didn't say anything about the zombies. Sujin says that this seems strange because if they were really a rescue team, they would be screaming for survivors instead of shooting. At that moment a voice appears on the radio. The man introduces himself as the leader of the rescue team and asks if 01 is still alive. The protagonist prefers not to answer because he thinks this rescue is suspicious. In addition, the leader does not present his own identity. He only introduces himself as a rescue team. Suddenly the protagonist asks Sujin what a doctor does when there is a deadly contamination. The girl replies that normally they burn anything close to infection. The protagonist says that it is exactly that. He believes that people outside Antarctica already know what is happening, but there's no benefit to letting the world know about a zombie outbreak. Probably what these people want to do is eliminate all the survivors, so there's no one to leak for information to the rest of the world. Soonji says that it is impossible for anyone to do this, but Taehwan states that this is the most convenient way to eliminate them. He looks out the window and sees several zombies falling. Then he sees two well-equipped men. The protagonist quickly realizes that these guys are after them. He soon bends down and tells the girl that they are screwed. She asks if these guys really aren't from the rescue team. Taehwan makes a sad expression and Sujin realizes that these men are no good. The boy says that for now they will hide and assess the situation. Suddenly the window above them shatters. The shards fly everywhere and the two cover each other. The men outside shoot all over the building while talking in English. The one in the brown cap scolds the other for shooting so recklessly. The one in the white hood replies that he is only acting like he has. Suddenly he is interrupted by a voice coming from his walkie-talkie. The protagonist asks if he can hear him. The one in the white hood quickly says yes and asks if he is okay. Taehwan answers yes and asks if they can help him. The man gives a satisfied smile when he hears this and asks where he is. The protagonist replies that he is on the outskirts of the base, in a two-story building. There are no zombies there. The man seems confused about the location and says he is going to save him. Minutes later Sujin looks through the hole in the door and says that it is working. The men took the bait, but one of them took his motorcycle. Taehwan believes that they are trying to get rid of the evidence. Sujin asks what they are going to do now. The protagonist shows the fishing line and gives a smile. The girl looks at it and says that she has a bad feeling. Taehwan replies that they will not go down without a fight. The scene changes to the man in the white hood breaking into the building. That the protagonist passed the location. He says that this is the last room. Behind him there are several fallen bodies. The man realizes that the protagonist is not there. He contacts the captain named Ciego and says that garbage deceived them. The captain calls him a stupid idiot and tells him to follow the manual. The man agrees. He gets angry at being scolded by the boss and puts the blame on the protagonist. The guy starts hunting through all the buildings and says he will destroy this boy with his bare hands. Suddenly he sees a building with a light on and is sure that Taehwan is there, so he gets on the bike and accelerates. The man is confident and says it doesn't matter how good this guy is, because in the end he can't be better than a gunman. He drives and drives past the building, then starts shooting at everything. The windows shatter. The man yells that it doesn't matter where the survivor is because he's a rat in a trap right now. At that moment the guy drives to an open shed and asks if this is the base's energy building. He gives a smile remembering the captain's words and says he will follow the manual. Meanwhile the protagonist and Sujin are hiding. Taehwan doesn't understand much what the crazy guy is saying outside and is in doubt if it's Portuguese or English. Sujin is quite afraid because the men are shooting recklessly. She says that they can be hit by bad luck. The protagonist reassures her saying that everything is fine unless they explode something like a bomb. The moment the boy says this, a strong yellow light invades the window and an explosion happens outside. Taehwan soon realizes that it was the energy building. At that moment his memory goes back to the past and the protagonist remembers that in the beginning he saw the base in China being blown up. Now everything makes sense. Those men are aiming and blowing up the generators. Their goal is was to make the survivors be eaten by the zombies, or be caught by the cold. Suddenly the man screams for the protagonist and asks if he is still there. The guy says he has nowhere else to run, this will be the end of him. Taehwan hugs Sujin as the word end echoes through his mind. He knows that if he survives this it will still be very difficult. After all, this is the desert frozen Antarctica. This place is perfect for zombies anyway. Giving up is not an option because there is something more important. He looks at Sujin, trembling, and mentally says that she is important, then asks the girl not to worry about it because these men should not have 2 bombs. Sunji looks at him with his eyes full of tears. At that moment the man keeps shooting outside the building until he notices a small light inside the house. He smiles, saying that there should be no electricity after the generator was blown up. The man has the feeling that the survivors are in this building and invades the place. He checks the bottom and finds 2 motorcycles. The man starts to say out loud that he finally found the rat. Taehwan continues to hide with Sunji and asks what language this crazy guy is speaking. She says she thinks it's Spanish. At that moment the captain speaks on the walkie-talkie. He says that the guy must eliminate any survivor if he finds it, but if he doesn't see anyone it's to destroy the emergency generator and return. Finally the captain reminds him that he is at the bottom of the scoreboard and hangs up. The man takes a deep breath, irritated, and says that he will solve this situation. Then he advances and realizes that the entire floor in front of him is stained by a dark black liquid. The guy wonders if that survivor was fighting with a zombie here. Suddenly he is surprised by a zombie on the ceiling that attacks him. The guy quickly shoots towards the creature. After that he continues walking around the room and tells the protagonist to appear. The guy regrets that he only had a grenade, otherwise he would have already destroyed this house. Suddenly a zombie hand wrapped in a fishing line flies towards him. He gets scared and dodges the body. That black liquid passed close to his mouth and the man knows he would be screwed if he consumed that. He says it was close and remembers the captain saying that he was at the bottom of the scoreboard. This makes him angrier and the guy yells that he will destroy these damn Koreans. At that moment other parts of the zombie's body fly towards him. He realizes where he is coming from and looks at the generator. The man gives a satisfied smile, but suddenly a body hanging upside down appears in front of him. The guy gets a fright and starts shooting. He ends up losing his balance and falls into a nearby box. The protagonist takes the opportunity and pulls the fishing line. A black liquid pours all over the man's body. Sunji quickly turns on the light. She and the protagonist position themselves, but the scene they see is a little different from what they expected. The man starts screaming in pain with that liquid running down his face and begs for help. This is kind of contradictory to Taehwan, and he asks if the crazy guy who wanted to destroy him is begging for his life. The guy replies that he will do anything if the boy leaves him alive. Sujin looks doubtfully at Taehwan. He then takes the lead in the situation and leaves the chainsaw on point. In case this man decides to change his mind, then the protagonist questions who he is and who his team is. The guy shows the scorpion emblem on his clothes. Taehwan angrily asks if he is from the Red Scorpion. The man starts vomiting black liquid. Meanwhile Taehwan asks how many of them came to Antarctica. The guy tries to talk but can't. Sunji approaches and tells the protagonist that the time has come. The man begins to transform. Taehwan gets angry because he still has a lot to ask. He turns on the chainsaw and hesitates. The girl says she can do it for him. The protagonist replies that he doesn't have to. He can do it. The boy finds it kind of contradictory to murder someone to survive, but he has no other option when that person turns into a zombie. The man screams as he is eliminated. After finishing what he had to do, the protagonist remembers that the man's last words were about a company. He thinks it's about the Red Scorpion Battalion. At that moment Taehwan asks Sujin to hold the gun. The girl obeys and her face doesn't look very satisfied. The protagonist understands her hesitation, but says that she has to take this because it can be important when in trouble. Sujin finally agrees. The protagonist then warns them that they need to get out of here now because the Red Scorpion organization is extremely strong. He believes it has at least 80 members and they probably came from the Chilean base. Sujin asks if they will flee in the opposite direction. The protagonist replies no. They go to the Chilean base. The girl desperately asks why he is doing this. Taehwan replies that it is possible that the Red Scorpion group is using the base as a camp. It is where the supplies will be stored. At that moment the group must be scattered throughout Antarctica, cleaning all the survivors. This means that they will rob an empty house. In addition, the organization is also cleaning the zombies along the way, so they will have a clean road without having to worry. After that the two begin to prepare to put the plans into action. With that man was found extra magazines, radios, knives, pistols and a suspicious medicine. The protagonist is not sure what it is, but decides to take it with him. At that moment the two leave the house and realize that the blizzard is decreasing. Taehwan observes the smoke from the generator. Suddenly when he looks up up with the binoculars he ends up seeing an enemy plane, probably from the Red Scorpion organization. He soon screams for Sujin and she approaches. Taehwan desperately asks the girl to run away, but Sujin doesn't understand anything. He starts to pull her arm and says it's an airstrike. A bombing will start soon. The two keep running for their lives. The plane starts destroying everything around them. Sujin asks what they should do, and the protagonist asks her to hide in the snow. Suddenly a bomb falls near the two of them and they fly away. The plane continues circling in that area. Taehwan finds a hole nearby and pulls Sujin. He puts the girl there and takes a white sheet out of the bag, then covers them. Taehwan explains that they need to stay there. That organization probably has thermal imaging equipment. The night bombing is her main focus. The girl cries desperately. Meanwhile, explosions keep happening all over the place. Inside the plane, someone introduces himself as an angel of destruction and says it's done. Everything around the snow starts to catch fire. The buildings and sheds are also hit. Taehwan and Sujin are still under the sheet listening to that noise. The protagonist cries looking at her and asking if this is the end. At that moment, Sujin puts his hand on Taehwan's face and pulls him towards him, then gives him a kiss. Seconds later, the boy falls with the sheet and everything backwards. He can finally breathe a sigh of relief because he no longer hears the noise of the plane. Sujin looks to the sides to make sure there are no enemies around, while Taehwan lies on the ground saying that they survived. 30 minutes after the attack, the two recover some items. Fortunately, the food was inside the bag and managed to be saved. Already the snowmobiles that they worked so hard to get were destroyed. Faced with this situation, they started looking for anything useful among the wreckage. Fortunately, Sujin found a suitcase with emergency coats, and they will immediately change clothes. The exchange was a great choice because the old coat was red and stood out too much. At that moment, Sujin sees something flying and asks if it is a seagull. The protagonist soon sees that it is a plane and covers himself again with the girl. He asks where she has ever seen such a big seagull. Sujin is confused. Taehwan explains that it is a US military plane. The girl is surprised by this information. The protagonist adds that the soldiers and the bombing that attacked them were all Americans. Sujin asks if this means that even if they escape from Antarctica, they will still be followed by the United States. Taehwan replies that it is possible, but what he doesn't understand is why the United States is committed to eliminating the survivors in Antarctica. Sujin replies that it is because of the black liquid. Taehwan removes the sheet and asks if she thinks there are zombies in the US too. The girl replies that probably. The protagonist asks her to explain how she came to this conclusion. The girl says she thinks they are doing some tests using the zombies here, such as exploding or simply setting everyone on fire. Taehwan thinks for a while and thinks that the girl's thinking is right. He strokes her hair and says that she really is very smart. Sujin replies that only he underestimates her. After that, the two face each other for a few seconds with a smile on their faces. Suddenly, the protagonist remembers the kiss that happened a few minutes ago and turns his face embarrassed, then says that she can get up because the plane is gone. Sujin cleans her clothes and says that whatever happens, they are alive. That's what matters. Taehwan soon asks what she intends to do when she leaves here. Sujin thinks for a moment and says that she wants to eat Korean black bean noodles. She even imagines herself eating at the restaurant near her house. This answer makes the protagonist burst into laughter, and he says that he is expected of Sujin. The girl does not like to be mocked and starts throwing snow at him. While she asks if the boy is making fun of the restaurant, Taehwan runs and replies that this is very funny, then asks if she will want a double portion. Sujin runs after him when he suddenly bumps into his stationary body. She realizes that the protagonist has become serious and asks what happened. The girl asks him to stop acting like that because she is afraid. At that moment, Taehwan points forward and asks if that is a snowmobile in perfect condition. The two went to the vehicle and realized that it was the same one used by the soldiers. It seems that they landed on this coast and then moved. They probably won't come back since they destroyed the plant. Then the protagonist realizes that he was lucky. In addition, on the motorcycle he still had a radio and enough fuel to reach the base in Chile. The protagonist feels confident and gets into the vehicle with the girl. He starts driving and says that first they will go to the base in China to see if there is any supply. Sujin agrees. Taehwan turns his face and asks her if that restaurant is really good. Sujin shouts yes, and he says that when he leaves he will eat there. The scene changes to the Qiling base from China. As we can see, the place was also bombed a lot. Several debris are scattered by the snow, but for some reason there is a man still alive inside one of the wreckage. It seems he is quite injured and ended up leaving a trail of red liquid along the way he passed. A few minutes later, the protagonist arrived at the Chinese base. He noticed that everything here was also destroyed as well as his base, but when he entered one of the wreckage he found an unexpected presence. That injured man was the brother of the protagonist's best friend and worked worked at the base as a heavy equipment specialist. Tae-hwan quickly recognizes Park Dong-hyuk, and the man thanks God for seeing him. He also remembers Sujin and calls her doctor, then asks her to help him with her leg. Sujin goes towards him, but is stopped by Tae-hwan. The protagonist points the gun at Dong-hyuk's head and leaves the man confused. He asks the guy to answer the questions truthfully if he wants help. A few days ago there was a celebration of Lee's birthday and everyone from the base gathered to wish happy birthday. They were having fun when Lee ended up spilling coffee on her clothes. She went out to change and the party continued. Hyung approached Dong-hyuk and asked to bring firewood for the barbecue, but the man replied that this was Tae-hwan's job. Another guy reminded that the protagonist hadn't arrived yet because of the blizzard, so he had to go get it. Dong-hyuk gets up very lazily and heads to the door. As soon as he opens it, he finds other guests who were about to enter. Dong-hyuk realized that they were from the base of China. A few minutes passed and the guy managed to get enough firewood to make the barbecue. Then he went back for the birthday, but when he was about to arrive at the house, the Chinese from the beginning ran past him. Dong-hyuk didn't understand anything, and when he entered the house he had the worst sight of his life. Some of his friends were on the ground while the other had already turned into zombies. His brother was trying to protect himself with a frying pan and shouted for him to run away. Dong-hyuk stops for a moment bewildered by the situation, and when he becomes lucid he sees a zombie running towards him. Without thinking twice he takes out one of the logs and hits the woman. Dong-hyuk soon realizes that that is Lee. She remained alive and ran with the firewood on her body. Eventually it was eliminated by the protagonist when he returned to base. At that moment Dong-hyuk finishes the story about everything that happened. The protagonist asks if he knows how it started. The man replies that some said that the zombie outbreak started in the barracks, but most of the zombies they saw were trapped in the power plant. Tae-hwan asks if there is anything else. Dong-hyuk starts to stutter and cries. The protagonist loses his patience and points the gun while screaming, telling him to talk. At this moment Dong-hyuk confesses that he used it as bait and then trapped it with the zombies. Tae-hwan asks if he used a person as bait and he confirms, saying that he used the Chinese. Seung-ji is frightened by this revelation and asks how a human being has the courage to do this to someone else. Tae-hwan soon asks what happened to Hyung and says that he found his body at the base, so the man should not even think about lying. Depending on the answer he leaves, of course he will shoot. Dong-hyuk shakes his hands negatively, saying that he would never do that. He says that on that day a man all in black approached, saying that he could not be sure if Hyung was infected or not, then hit his neck without thinking twice. From the description the protagonist recognizes that he is the leader of the squad. Sujin asks if he is talking about that leader who was recently assigned. He confirms and says that he did not live much with that man, but everyone commented that the leader was someone uncomfortable to have around. Dong-hyuk says that that man had a gun from who knows where and shot everyone. He was a complete dictator. Before shooting, the man said that they were obstacles and would be a perfect bait. At first Dong-hyuk decided to side with that guy to survive, and that's when he arrested the Chinese. But then he realized that he was crazy and managed to run away on his own, hence the wound on his leg. The protagonist looks at it and says that it is hard to believe immediately. Dong-hyuk starts to go through his pockets and says that what he said is all true. He then takes a pen drive out of his jacket and says that everything he said is recorded there. Tae-hwan and Sujin are taken by surprise. Dong-hyuk says that this is all the material from their base. A USB containing the footage. The protagonist quickly remembers Cap talking about the pen drive they were recording. The boy wonders how he could forget about it. Sujin asks how they are going to watch it without a computer. The guy replies that they can watch it when he is out of Antarctica and adds that this can be worth a lot of money. The protagonist agrees, saying that images like this would certainly make a lot of headlines out there. He then orders Sujin to get the item. Dong-hyuk delivers it and begs the protagonist to help him. He can't stand so much pain in his leg anymore. Tae-hwan gives the order for Sujin to bandage it and says he will keep an eye out. The girl says she thinks it's not very serious and asks to take a look. Dong-hyuk thanks him. Suddenly the radio in the protagonist's pocket starts beeping and he gets scared. The boy remembers finding it on the motorcycle and ended up not setting it up, so he deduces that the person on the other side must be someone from the Red Scorpion. At this moment the person on the other end of the line speaks in English and calls for someone with the nickname Mosquito, then asks if he is listening. Dong-hyuk is surprised that he is hearing a different voice after so long. He soon asks where the protagonist found it. Sujin replies that it's a long story, but basically they are not being chased only by zombies. Suddenly the person on the other end of the line asks if it is 01. The captain then gives a smile and says that he finally found him. Apparently he is still alive. The man says that if he's the guy who took down zombies without a gun, then he's definitely a fun guy. The captain finishes by saying that if 01 really is alive, he hopes his gift arrives safely. Upon hearing this, the protagonist runs to the door. While Sujin screams for him, the captain wishes him to enjoy it well. At that moment, Taehwan sees a zombie swarm walking towards him. He realizes that this man's voice is the same as the one that arrived at the base. Sujin asks if it was the man who left first. The protagonist replies yes and says that this guy probably left that soldier in the white hood to solve everything himself. He takes a deep breath and says that this organization is enjoying hunting humans. The scene changes to a man peeking at the wreckage where the protagonist was. That man is Captain Siego, the same one who spoke to Taehwan. One of the American soldiers asks the captain if they should let them go like that. Siego replies that it doesn't really matter because when it's all over, they will split the score. The soldier complains that the supplies are running out. Siego laughs and says that this is what hunting is all about. The bigger and riskier it is, the more fun it gets then. The captain gets serious and wonders if 01 is an ex-soldier. After all, he took down zombies without a weapon, even murdered armed mercenaries and stole their equipment. Siego smiles with his gold teeth and says that this monotonous ice kingdom is about to get a lot more interesting. Meanwhile, the protagonist observes the situation and narrows his eyes. He realizes that something is wrong because those zombies are not emitting black smoke. The protagonist remembers the previous zombies and says that even when they are injured or burned, the steam still comes out. In addition, the zombies have abnormal abilities outside of the human physique, but these seem very slow. Suddenly, a man in the middle of the crowd of zombies runs forward. Taehwan sees it with his gun in hand and asks if there is anyone more active among them. The boy is about to shoot when that man screams for help. The protagonist looks scared, realizing that he is not a zombie. The guy with the leg wound keeps asking for help.